They expected torture. America gave them hamburgers and Coca-Cola. They expected to be broken. Instead, an American handed them a hamburger. That impossible moment, a single tray, a sweating glass bottle, the hiss of a soda cap, unhooked everything the men had been taught to believe about the enemy, and it began a slow, stubborn unraveling inside their chests that would follow them long after the war ended. The train rolled in with the sound of brakes and iron on steel, spitting men onto a Wisconsin platform that smelled of cold and coal smoke. It was 1944, a hard year of oceans and islands and impossible distances. These soldiers had been taken from the Pacific, from skirmishes and starvation and fear, loaded into freight cars and carried inland. They stepped down into the white and folded their hands around themselves against cold that cut through uniforms and bone. For weeks, some had eaten only rice, so thin it was almost water. Some had not slept. All had been taught one lesson over and over since the day they enlisted. Capture is shame. Capture is worse than death. They had rehearsed humiliation as a ritual, had practiced silent prayer for an end that would spare their families disgrace. But what met them on the platform was not the caricature they had been painted with. There were wooden barracks in neat rows, a perimeter of wire, a guard tower, men with clipboards and Red Cross armbands moving with the slow economy of people doing a job. There were medics with gentle hands and bath facilities where lice were washed away, not used as evidence of guilt, but as a matter of hygiene. A man with a bandaged arm expected to be ignored. Instead, a medic checked the dressing, cleaned the wound, and wrapped it again. The prisoners froze at touch, not from shyness, but because to be touched with care by the enemy contradicted everything they had been taught. They flinched at kindness like people startled by silence in a thunderstorm. Order is not the same as mercy, and rules are not affection. But order, in this context, carried a moral weight. The camp functioned like a machine of small, relentless decency, registration forms, medical checks, the measured cadence of roll calls. Red Cross observers made notes. Officers enforced regulations. None of these acts were ostentatious. None were framed as charity. They were simply procedures that recognized the men as persons who had rights under the Geneva Convention. For prisoners who had been told their captors were monsters, the bureaucracy felt like a betrayal of the story they had been trained to tell themselves. It undermined propaganda the same way a single clear glass undermines a rumor. On the second day, or maybe the morning after they arrived, time blurs when hunger runs your life, the bugle called. Boots crunched through frozen mud. Men shuffled through a door where steam rose in lazy curtains from metal counters. A cook in rolled sleeves landed a hot patty on a soft roll, slid a pile of fried potatoes beside it, and dropped a sweating glass bottle into place. The words on the label were a small, foreign script, but everyone in the room knew what that hiss meant. Some of them laughed at first, a small, brittle sound. Then one man lifted the tray like it was a relic and bit as if testing reality. Fat slid down his fingers. He pressed his palm to his lips as if to hold the impression in place, like a sacrament. The sound that followed, a half cough, a small laugh, the suppressed murmur of a man who tasted something he had not eaten in months, is the sound the story lives on. It is tiny and private and fatal to pride. It is the moment a man realizes that living does not have to mirror the narrative of honor he was taught. It is the moment he learns that survival can feel like betrayal. There is a moral architecture to this story that needs to be precise. It is not a tale of simple goodness beating evil. The camp was not an Eden. There were guards who were brusque, farmers who spat on prisoners when they thought no one would see, petty cruelties in the margins. But the institutional framework, inspections, neutral observers, routine distribution of rations, medical treatment, created a stable environment where ordinary acts of humanity could occur without being framed as spectacle. For American viewers, that matters. It maps onto a national idea about law, procedure, and decency as habits of power. For the prisoners, it created cognitive dissonance so intense that some clung harder to propaganda because it was the only shield they had left. The weeks that followed were a study in small, accumulating shocks. At first, the prisoners watched everything as if through a screen. How a guard in an overcoat pocketed a pack of cigarettes and shuffled down the line. How a child occasionally appeared at a distant fence and waved at a figure who looked up and then looked away. They noticed the ordinariness of it. Tractors moving in the fields beyond the wire, smoke trailing from kitchen chimneys, the steady rhythm of bread and meat and sugar. For men who had survived jungle shortages, the sight of abundance was like an insult. But the mind adapts to small continuities. The camp offered what the prisoners most needed: regular meals, shelter, a routine that did not demand the constant vigilance of combat. It offered letters home, heavily censored, but letters nonetheless. It offered the option, in small doses, of learning English or trading a carved piece of wood for an extra cigarette. Some men rejected those things as treachery. Others accepted them because the alternative was to starve. Those two reactions, refusal and acceptance, defined the split among the prisoners, and that split became the human drama. One afternoon, a prisoner stood in a canteen line and watched an American soldier buy a bottle of soda. The soldier paid with the same casual air he would use at a local diner. The prisoner, whose whole world had shrunk to the next meal, watched the ease of that movement as if it were a language he had to decode. Later, when he tasted the soda, the sweetness seemed to slide under his defenses. He felt guilty for enjoying it, ashamed for wanting more. That guilt is not theoretical. It is a lived sensation that registers physically as nausea or the slow tightening of the chest. It creates a question that won't leave him. What do I owe for being kept alive? The story needs short, vivid scenes because the human drama is found in them. There is the guard named Miller, young, from Illinois, who shows a photograph of his family to prisoners during a lull. The men look at the faces, then at their own hands. There is the cook with permanent stains on his fingers who slides a tray across the counter like handing a loaf to a neighbor. There is the prisoner who hides a wrapper in his sleeve as though it were contraband, keeping it like a relic of transgression. These details are what turn a political outline into lived experience. Arguments flare. One night in the barracks, a heated discussion breaks out. To accept is to betray, says one voice. To survive is not betrayal, replies another. The argument is not melodrama. It is the central ethical question the prisoners face. The men who insist on purity often have the loudest moral voices, but they are not immune to hunger. The men who embrace small comforts survive physically, but carry a new burden. That tension sustains the narrative and keeps the listener engaged, because it mirrors a question anyone might face in a different form. When survival depends on compromise, what does honor require? Beyond the mess hall and the barracks, the camp's day-to-day routine is revealing in its ordinariness. Work details, cutting wood, clearing roads, helping on neighboring farms, give prisoners tasks that occupy time and create small economies. They earn coupons which they can spend at the canteen, buy chocolate or writing paper, and these transactions become tiny moral economies. A prisoner standing in line to buy a chocolate bar is not simply exchanging money for sugar. He is performing an act that redefines him in his own eyes. It is therapy and humiliation at once. Letters become a recurring motif for the narrative. A name appears in the margin of a form, Osaka. A thin envelope arrives, and the handwriting is familiar, but the words are clipped. We are alive. Those three words can contain everything: relief, guilt, the knowledge that survival has consequences for those left behind. A man reads the letter and imagines his children eating grass. He hears laughter in the mess hall and feels the sting of a divided life. That inner fracture, the private ledger of survival, is one of the most powerful emotional beats you can give the listener. It is intimate and universal at once. Then the world interrupts. Rumors of bombings, of cities burning, of a changing tide arrive in snippets. The prisoners listen to guarded news or exchange whispers about radio reports smuggled past censorship. The larger events of the war press in on the small world of the camp, and the moral arithmetic shifts again. If the home islands are destroyed, what does returning mean? If your family has been reduced to scraps, is the taste of meat on your tongue an unforgivable luxury? These are not rhetorical questions. They are the real, aching concerns that animate the men at night when lights are out and pens scratch in private notebooks. When surrender finally comes, in a voice, in a broadcast, in the stunned silence that follows, the reaction in the camp is not a single emotion, but a collage. Some men weep, some sit in stunned disbelief, some brood on what will happen next. The announcement does not erase the internal divisions. It amplifies them. Returning home is no longer an imagined restoration. It is a terrifying prospect. Men worry about being labeled traitors, cowards, or worse. The gift of survival now reads like a social danger. Repatriation is orderly in procedure, but chaotic in feeling. Lists are made. Men line up with bundles. Medical checks again. Uniforms replaced with the same care as before. They are loaded on ships not as heroes, but as survivors, and the voyage across the Pacific feels like a passage between worlds. On deck, The men stand and watch the horizon, silent. Some write in notebooks, small attempts to pin down what they have experienced. One man writes, in cramped script, "I thought the enemy would break us with violence. He broke us with food." The line is simple and haunting. Arrival is a shock. Cities are scarred, families dispersed. The men step onto ruined quays and face a reality their training never prepared them for: the social cost of survival. Some are welcomed with embraces, others are met with accusations. The man who once hid a soda wrapper in his sleeve now finds his actions judged by a society that has suffered on the home front. He has kept his life and now must explain it. Many cannot. Silence becomes a survival strategy again, this time from shame. The moral residue of the camp lingers long after the formal processes end. Some prisoners later speak of what they lived through. Others bury their stories beneath layers of duty and silence. For those who choose to tell, there is often a counterintuitive pride in the memory of survival and an accompanying sorrow for what was lost. For those who stay silent, the memory is a private ache that colors the rest of their lives. If you tell this story well for an American audience, you do more than recount a surprising historical fact. You place emphasis on values the audience recognizes: order, rule of law, procedural decency, the humility of ordinary service. You keep the tone measured, not triumphalist, not apologetic, and you let the human contradictions do the work. You let the listener feel the surprise the prisoners felt, and then you make them sit with the consequences. Every 2 or 3 minutes, land a small reveal. A letter arrives, a child hands over candy, a guard shows a photograph, a rumor of a bombing reaches the camp. These are the microshocks that propel attention through a long narrative. The truth this story offers is complicated. Mercy can wound as much as violence, and survival can create guilt where once there was only endurance. Yet the larger lesson, that small acts of humanity can unsettle hardened ideologies, is a powerful one for a viewer whose national identity includes the idea that law and decency can be deployed even in war. The story resists simple moralizing. It asks questions rather than delivers a sermon. That is why it holds people. It allows space for the listener to reckon with the discomfort of being human under pressure. When a man in a barracks folds a letter into his pocket, when a guard reaches out without malice, when a child hands candy through wire, the camera, or the voice, should linger. Describe the condensation on the bottle, the way fat shines on a bun, the sound of a cap popping, the texture of a wool blanket replacing a strip of cloth. These sensory details are the anchors. They give listeners places to land their imagination so that the moral questions can resonate on top. In the end, the men leave. The camp remains, a set of buildings and fields and routine. The world outside has been remade in brutal ways. The men who returned carried with them complicated memories, gratitude and guilt, relief and an ache for what had been lost. Some told their children. Some wrote in private notebooks. Most lived quietly with the contradiction that their enemy had fed them, clothed them, and sometimes smiled at them, and the knowledge that sometimes the kindest gestures cut deeper than the cruelest wounds. Tell it in long paragraphs that breathe, in scenes that are specific, and in moments that keep shifting expectation. Use names for texture, but focus on the small acts. The patty on the bun, the hiss of the cap, the clap of boots in frozen mud, the scrap of a letter, the photograph pressed into a palm. Keep tension not by blood, but by moral pressure. What does survival demand of us? That is the question that will hold an American audience through 20 minutes and more, because it asks them to reckon with strength and mercy, with rules and consequences, in a way that is both national and deeply human.